Okay, we have some jargon to learn in this last lesson. We're going to talk about dependent and independent clauses. You know me. Okay, it's time for some jargon. You can do this, it's pretty logical. It's just like the jargon we learned earlier. When sentences get more complicated, the various parts are given names so you can refer to them. Simple sentences are just that, a simple thought, one thought. Mice eat cheese. Remember, compound sentences, two simple sentences connected by a coordinating conjunction? Okay, here's the new jargon. It's just a word to help you refer to an entire part of a sentence without having to say the whole thing. Each thought in a compound sentence is called a clause. Snow falls, clause. Rain drops, clause. This is how you identify clauses. When you read the thought before the comma and the CC, the thought makes sense by itself. Feathers float. Then the one behind the conjunction, rocks drop. Both of them make sense by themselves. Okay, now we're going to add the jargon. If it makes sense as a whole thought, it's called independent. In a compound sentence, since the parts of the sentence make sense by themselves, they're called independent clauses. Feathers float, independent clause. Rocks drop, independent clause. When you're analyzing sentences, you can just refer to the parts of the sentence as a clause, whether it's dependent or independent. You can just call it a clause. Everybody will know what you're talking about, unless, of course, what's important is if it's independent or dependent. A compound sentence is two simple sentences connected by a coordinating conjunction, which you ignore when you're analyzing. So you read, mice eat cheese, dogs eat meat, and you ignore the coordinating conjunction. Complex sentences have sort of a bump in them. Remember, complex sentences, you can make a compound sentence into a complex sentence by changing the coordinating conjunction to a subordinating conjunction. Oh, and don't forget to remove the comma. Conjunctions make all the difference in sentences, and so in sentence analysis, you want to identify the conjunctions first. Pay very close attention to which kinds are in there. You can make a complex sentence by changing the coordinating conjunction into a subordinating conjunction, and don't forget to remove the comma. So, mice eat cheese while dogs eat meat. When you analyze the compound sentence, you ignore the coordinating conjunction. When you're analyzing a complex sentence, you don't ignore the conjunction when you're reading it to see if it makes sense by itself. Instead, you read the thought after the conjunction with the conjunction. So you would read, mice eat cheese. Okay, makes sense by itself. But while dogs eat meat, with the word while attached to it, it doesn't make sense by itself. While dogs eat meat doesn't make sense. So that would make it dependent. When you read the thought after the conjunction with the conjunction, the thought no longer makes sense. That creates a dependent clause, while dogs eat meat. The subordinating conjunction is always read as the first word followed by the complete thought, but the subordinating conjunction makes the thought incomplete. Feels confusing, but that's the way the method works. This is why they kept telling you don't start a sentence with because. When you add the because, what follows doesn't make sense by itself. Okay, this looks confusing. It'll be less confusing with practice. Mice eat cheese. Makes sense by itself. Independent. Ignore the coordinating conjunction. Dogs eat meat. Independent. Makes sense by itself. Mice eat cheese. Independent. Makes sense by itself. While dogs eat meat. Dependent. Doesn't make sense by itself. So you have a compound sentence with a coordinating conjunction and a complex sentence when you have the while as the conjunction. Naturally, you can write complex sentences without first creating compound sentences, but this is a good trick when you're editing your essays. Many simple sentences can be made into much more sophisticated writing by changing the conjunction. Later on, when you start working on writing, this trick will be very useful. Okay, dependent, independent clauses. Now on to lesson 12. First, the quiz. In a compound sentence, what are the complete thoughts called? Independent clauses. In a complex sentence, what is the complete thought called? Independent clause. In a complex sentence, what is the incomplete thought called? A dependent clause. What defines a compound or a complex sentence? The conjunctions. What kinds of conjunctions? Coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. Which conjunctions can you name? What kinds of conjunctions are fanboys? Coordinating conjunctions. How do we abbreviate coordinating conjunctions? CC. Name the CCs. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. What are the other kinds of conjunctions? Subordinating conjunctions. How do we abbreviate subordinating conjunctions? SC. What do SCs create? Dependent clauses. That was a really long quiz. Okay, on to lesson 12.